Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I've got a full house. It's Patrick McGilp, Chris McElwain, and John Yogi Hughes. We're here to talk all things Celtic. I'm going to start with you, Paddy. Kazakhstan away days. Have you done one before?
Not yet, and I don't think I'll be doing it this season. It's the other end of Kazakhstan, so it's not even as if you could say, oh, it's the European end. It's the other side, the far off version of Kazakhstan. I've been there before with Astana, haven't we? I never went to either of those. I was a bit too young, and fair play to anyone heading out there. I'm sure Paul the Tim will be there. I'm sure there'll be a few other diehards heading out. I'm sure there probably is a Kazakhstan CSC. I've never heard of it, but I'm sure there's probably definitely one out there. Definitely, maybe you could say. But no, I'll not be heading out. I think much like everyone else, I think we're just looking to do the business in the home leg, aren't we? A week tonight, aye. And then you've got the return fixture on the Tuesday. So, aye, a repeat of Astana 2017, 5-0 at home. Less of a fright away. I remember I think we were 4-1 down at that point with about 20-30 minutes left. So a bit too close for comfort, that one. But mountain of goals in the first leg, and I think we'll all be able to relax a wee bit more. But of course, what we would all want is a few signings in before then. I think the deadline's tomorrow, barring sort of one or two emergency signings 24 hours before. You can register 2 players. So a few forward players wouldn't go amiss, especially a striker and right wing. But aye, that home leg is mightily important. I know we've looked a bit sort of firmer, a bit stronger away from home in the Champions League last season. So hopefully if we can go over there and just sort of bank on either a draw or maybe a slim defeat and build up the goals at home, I think that's what we're all looking for.
Yeah, you're right. Astana. Brendan Rodgers was the gaffer. We win 5-0 at home. And then it's 4-3 away from home, a defeat. The other time was Shakhtar Karagandhi, 2-0. They beat us away from home and we win 3-0 at home. So we've not got a very good away record. And you're right, there will be the hardcore going on the away days. Maybe Declan McConville will pop up. Probably Natasha Meikle. And as you say, Paul the Tim as well. Chris, I think when we looked at the possibilities in relation to who we might play in the qualifier, most of us were saying, right, we don't really want a trip to Kazakhstan. We don't want to play Kairat. They're there because they did the business last night, and credit to them. But it's more the travel, isn't it? It's the 7,000-mile round trip that you get concerned about. And as Patrick says, let's look to do the business next week. You're hoping for maybe a 2 or a 3 goal cushion, aren't you? And I'm not taking that for granted, but that's what you want going away in a tie like this, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I think at the very least we need that 2 or 3 goal cushion to go out, because it's the travelling, the distance, which will obviously take it out of the players, despite the fact they'll travel in relative comfort compared to the rest of us. But then you've obviously got the weather out there. You've also got the element that Kairat are, I think, about 18 or 19 games into their season. So despite the obvious, what you think would be the obvious skill and quality, the fitness levels may be telling. But I think we should, even without the signings that we so desperately want, and I'm really hoping for a couple of signings in as soon as possible, because even though we've won both our early games this season, we need recruits. It's very obvious, and we're 1 or 2 injuries away from having a massive squad crisis at the moment, especially in key areas. So. But even without those signings, you would like to think we've got enough to do the business, at least at home. And then, even if we do view the away tie as a little bit of a banana skin, it's maybe one that we can absorb. But I think there's a lot riding on that first leg, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. When we faced Karagandhi back in 2013 and we win the game 3-0, the team was as follows: Forster in goals, Matthews, Ambrose, Mulgrew and Lustig, Brown, Commons, Ledley, Forrest, Samaras and Stokes. Van Dijk came on as a 90th minute substitute, and Borigter came on with 11 minutes to spare. Did he turn the game? Probably not. Commons, Samaras and Forrest with the goals. John, it's a wee bit like looking at that game last night. At least it would have been the devil you knew had Kairat not won the game. But they've done really, really well. And like a lot of Celtic fans since last night, doing a wee bit of research online about where they are, a wee bit of history of the football club as well. But it's a tough game. There's no doubt about it. But like Chris says, John, it would be less of a worry if you had these options up top that Rodgers is continually going on about.
Yeah, I mean, it is the travel time that's massive, and especially with that Rangers game as well. So it's going to be a very, very difficult few days for the players. It's a 7-hour flight, as I understand it, so they've got to fly out, fly back. That ruins, the day out is lost, the day back is lost to training or anything. So it really, really impacts your preparation. It's definitely not the tie you would have wanted. And also, they beat Slovan, fair enough. I wouldn't be confident about the way we are playing just now against virtually anyone, in a European setting. So I'm still very concerned about it. As I understand it, and I was talking to, someone who has got a fair degree of connection, and what he was saying was that at least 2 of the players that we would have wanted to sign for this they're the ones holding things up. They have said, "Will come back and talk to me once you've qualified for the Champions League." And I think Balak Wisha is one of them as well. So, it's not necessarily us that's holding it up, but in terms of a couple of things I learned as well, it seems that Rodgers and Tisdale are bosom buddies, and Tisdale was basically his appointment. They are working very, very closely together. So it's not the fact that they are working, they're working to separate agendas. That's not what's happening at all. Tisdale's doing his thing. Rodgers has more interest in some players than others. But this is by process of elimination. We've come to this. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here straight away. But by process of elimination, what the problem is. So it's not Rodgers, it's not Tisdale. As Lawrence was saying, I think yesterday, they have worked together very closely. They have identified a number of options in each position that are within the acceptable parameters. And then, as they say, it's up to the money men to get the deal over the line. So they're not the problem. So then you come to Nicholson and the CFO. And as it's been characterised to me before, Nicholson is not the guy who's got an ego in this situation, or he's not the guy who would be putting a block on pretty much anything, really. Nicholson's the paperwork guy. He's always been the paperwork guy. So, it's characterised really as, is he likely to do the block? And the chances are absolutely not. So we come to the final hurdle. And, by process of elimination, this is definitely Dermot Desmond that's doing this. I think he was annoyed about, spending money last year, and perhaps, he's obsessed with value. All of his entire business is obviously based on identifying undervalued companies and building them up. So he's obsessed with value. And I don't think he felt he got value for money last year. Michael Nicholson, frankly, doesn't have the power to subvert Brendan, because Brendan would just go around him to Dermot. And I think it's definitely Dermot Desmond that's blocking everything happening, because he wants to ensure he's get value for money, and he's the only person, in fact, with the power to block what's happening here. So I just don't believe Michael Nicholson is not presenting him with deals. I think Michael Nicholson is talking to the players, coming up with a price, agreeing a fee, taking it to Dermot Desmond, and Dermot Desmond is saying no. And I think that's where the blockage is, based on what we've heard. But I'm glad to know that Tisdale and the manager are working closely together.
Absolutely.
I'm glad to know we are identifying players, and they're doing exactly what we think they should be doing. They're identifying players all within parameters, punting them upstairs, saying, here we go. And that's where the blockage is. But I don't believe it's with the executive. I believe it's with the majority shareholder.
Well, John, you're right. I think it's a relief if it's the case that Tisdale and Brendan Rodgers are working well together. But then there is that concern, and I think it's a bit short-sighted. Obviously, Dermot Desmond knows how to make money, Patrick. He's done not too bad over the last few decades at doing that. However, surely you look at the team as a whole rather than the 3 players who are being highlighted here in terms of their price. Surely you look at the progression that we made as a team. And I've said this and I've pointed it out, although not all starts. All three players mentioned, Ida, Engels and Trusty, all played 10 games in Champions League last season. They were a massive reason why we progressed as far as we did. They were a massive reason that we went so close against Bayern Munich to going into the extra time. So I think it would be unusual. And it certainly looks very much like a non-football kind of attitude to look at it that way. It's just a finance, it's a value kind of attitude. It's definitely a non-football attitude, Patrick.
Yeah, it definitely sounds that way, and we know that his involvement is probably overreaching from what Rodgers said. I think it was Tannadice or towards the end of the season, how he was in discussions with Dermot Desmond over a contract extension for Daisen Maeda, and you think, why is your sort of not majority shareholder, minority shareholder, but why is your effectively controlling shareholder in contract discussions with an individual player? You know, surely that's someone else's job. But as you highlight, I mean, the three players that cost a combined 26 million, they all did contribute in the Champions League. You know, whether they had a good season as a whole or not is irrelevant, really. I mean, Trusty came in and obviously had that brilliant performance against Atalanta. He came in and had a good spell in the run up to Christmas and New Year. Engels, I think, played almost every Champions League game. I'm not sure if he started every game, but I'm sure he played most of them. Anida, of course, scores, well, he doesn't score, it's an own goal, but he sort of makes that goal against Young Boys to send us through. He scores 2 away to Aston Villa. He's probably not hit the heights since that. He's not really scored any big goals since then, but he did contribute in the Champions League and certainly contributed in his loan spell. So, and as we know, the Champions League is where all the money is made. That's where we bring in nearly no revenue from winning the League Cup, the League and the Scottish Cup. I think it's about 6 million in prize money. Probably costs us more in bonuses actually than it does in bringing in revenue. So Europe is where the money is made, and Europe is where those three big signings have contributed. Again, I think you've said it in the last few weeks, Sean. It's hard to believe that we're in this situation again, where we refuse to spend the money in order to prepare for a qualifier, and would rather risk the qualifier and spend the money after. Now, fair enough, if it's, players we're trying to sign are waiting until we become a Champions League club in order to sign on the dotted line. I mean, there's not a lot we can do about that, which is, you've just got to hold your hands up in that scenario. But there are sort of glaring holes in our squad that we would all like fixed a lot sooner. And, just on the opponents, I mean, to be fair, we did negotiate Bratislava with, some ease 11 months ago in the Champions League. Kairat Almaty, they've obviously put them out, but it took them 210 minutes in a penalty shootout to do so, and I think they were actually behind in that penalty shootout, and they sort of salvaged it at the death. So not much better than Bratislava. So you'd like to think we can do the business at home. Obviously, football's not played on paper, but I'd like to think, you're talking there about what sort of scoreline we need. I think it needs to be 3 goals. I remember sitting at the Hapoel Beersheva home game, and we were 4-2 up, and then Scott Brown scored a volley. I bet he didn't score many of those in his career, but I thought the 3 goals was necessary, and you've seen in the away leg we lost 2-0. The 3 goals were necessary. Same with Astana the year after. So I'm looking for at least a 3-goal lead going into that away leg. But I still think we should be favourites. I still think with the squad and the manager we have, we should be getting through. But we've probably not helped ourselves. Whether those are circumstances out with our control, I think we could be going into this in a better state than what we are.
Yeah, the big concern for me, Patrick, is 1 or 2 issues between now and then, and it can happen on Friday night. We've seen Maeda reacting quite angrily at the weekend. All it takes is someone getting injured, and this is what concerns me a little bit. But going back to our previous trips over there, we played Astana a couple of times, and we eventually kind of struggled away from home, like you were saying, Patrick, and they beat us 4-3, but we still progressed due to a brilliant home leg. The team that night: Gordon, Lustig, Ayer, Beaton, Tierney, Cham, Brown, Forrest, McGregor, Sinclair and Griffiths. So 3 players who started that night may well start on Wednesday of next week. And James Forrest is basically turning into Near Beaton. It will be Forrest on the right wing every season for the next 5 seasons. The goals came from Sinclair and Cham and Griffiths. And I was just looking this morning as well, for all these lucky folks who are able to go over to these far-flung places. I was having a wee look to just see what it looked like, actually. So here we go. It's called the Central Stadium. And that's what it looks like. Nice wee training pitches to the side of it. And yeah, it looks as though you're in for a good time, actually, if you go over to Kazakhstan. And if you are planning to go, let us know. It would be really, really interesting to hear your travel plans for Kazakhstan. But there you go. That is the area that you'll be looking at once you get there. And I'm pretty sure we will be well prepared by the time that happens. Talking of preparation, part of that, of course, was at the weekend. And we came through a challenge against Aberdeen at Pittodrie. I'm going to start with yourself, Chris McElwain. Your overview of that game in the aftermath of that, watching back some of the decisions, non-decisions, the goals. Quite happy with the performance and the outcome, obviously.
I think so. I think there were a few shaky moments at the start. I felt as though we were, the quick counter from Aberdeen at times. A couple of fast players that they've got, causes a few problems. But actually, I thought we handled that quite well. We did show that physical resilience that we'd spoken about before the game that we needed to have. And we saw actually our own players give some of that back, which I think was good. And I'd like to see more of that throughout the season, because it's obvious it's quite often been labelled against our team that we're not physical enough. We don't show necessarily enough counter-aggression when it's required. So it was nice to see players like Cal Mack, Carter Vickers, AJ, etc. really show that aggression and get in amongst the Aberdeen players. And I think throughout the game, we kind of, we stood up to the test. We created a fair few chances. I think, there's been a lot of scrutiny on players like Adamida, for example, for maybe not getting into the positions that we need them to be in, not being able to link the play. Doesn't seem to be quite as comfortable as we need them in that kind of, number 9 role. So I think he's got quite a bit to prove to get a lot of the fans on side, and hopefully he can step up and do that. But I thought there were positive signs. I thought James Forrest continues to just be ageless. I mean, up to I think just before he came off around the 77th minute, about 30 seconds before, he tracked back all the way to break up one of the Aberdeen attacks, which you can't teach that. That's not talent. That's work ethic and attitude and giving your all for the badge. And I think that's that's a great example for the players around them and the players you want to hopefully bring in. But the big fear, as I looked at that match against Aberdeen, is there are 3 or 4 positions that if we get an injury, the drop in quality, in terms of the players that are then going to come in, is astonishing. I mean, it just drops the overall level of quality in the team, to quite a frightening degree. And as both the guys have said, why on earth are we in this position as we come up to what is potentially the biggest tie of the season so far, in terms of us making sure we get entry into the Champions League. So, yeah, I think, the Aberdeen game showed me that with that lineup, there's probably enough to get the job done. But a training injury, illness, and an injury in one of the matches between them could be in real trouble.
Yeah, that's the thing. And obviously they were speaking there at the weekend about Tierney and an illness and the fact that he didn't last the 90 due to that, rather than any kind of injury concerns. They're obviously managing his time. But you remove Tierney from that team, John, and you're looking at Scales, who apparently is the backup left back at the moment. Ina Moura's not had a sniff. If you lose Maid on the left wing, you're playing Forrest or Yang on the left. And there's a knock-on effect as well, because obviously you're then replacing the right winger, a wee bit like the left back. You're then replacing your centre half. So these are the areas, John, isn't it? These are the areas that you're really concerned about going into this glut of games. We're talking Falkirk, and then we're going to play Kairat at home. We've got, obviously, Livingston. We've got Kairat away and Rangers. There's a glut of games in there. Obviously, Rangers happening on the 31st of August. And you would hope that bodies are in. I'm not expecting it to happen this week, obviously. But they're the real concern, those areas, aren't they, John?
Well, I'll be at the Kairat game and the Livingston game, so really it's only the glamour ties I go for. So really looking forward to it. But, I mean, again, we have potentially, as Patrick has been saying, we have the makings of a good team. We are just incredibly short up front. Our defence looks okay. I just however, both Carter Vickers and Scales have like more than 100 passes than more than any other player in the team. Again, it was real horseshoe of death stuff for me against Aberdeen. It was so slow, and I don't think we've particularly picked up since last year. I think we're playing pretty much similarly to the way we were at the end of the season, which is my concern. I think we will pick up once we've got some more options up front, because there's only so much your defence and midfield can do, which they did do because it was defence and midfield that got the goals, or provided the goals. There's only so much they can do, and you know, I mean, I can't remember when was the last time James Forrest scored in like a European tie, for instance. So, and it's not blaming him; it's just pointing out the fact that, you know, I mean, then James Forrest, who is not young, is supposed to do what he's supposed to do 90 minutes in all of these games, and come off for Zhu Yang. You know, I mean, do me a favour, right? So it's going to have to be Nygren that goes out there, which means should we not even start Nygren out there? You know, and Maeda is badly off form at the moment, which is a real test for us because we absolutely need him. He's the only proven man we have up there. Well, that's not true, actually, when I say proven. Ida is, but unfortunately is again off form. So, you know, we're really struggling up front, and you know, we badly need some more options. As Chris said, the drop off is, you know, we have a good first 11. I mean, and someone was saying, you know, we should change it to a 3-5-2, and I think we could play well in a 3-5-2 with the options we have right now. But you know, but we've been through this before. Brendan just won't do it. He's as stubborn as Ange. You know, he will not change his formation. And the one time we thought he'd changed his formation, I think it was away to Atalanta. He said he didn't, and it was basically, you know, just everyone was a wee bit closer, which was true. We were very compact that night. It was a good performance. But, you know, I think, you know, if you consider, like, you know, Tierney, Carter Vickers, Alistair Johnson, in a back three, and then the options you'd have in a sort of that five with even McCowan and Nygren playing wide, and you know, you'd have a decent front two potentially in Ida and Yamada. So I mean, he'll not change. I don't know if there's even any point in sort of you know, discussing it, because he's so stubborn. But I think as things stand, you need to. I know it's the way he wants to play. I know it's the way he would like to play, but we just don't have the manpower for it. You know, I just don't think we have anything for it. And when I was saying Yamada, I was forgetting about Maeda, so it'd be Maeda and Ida up front in that, which is you know, on paper is a very good front too. You know, so I think 3-5-2 would definitely suit us better, and potentially against this mob who, you know, are unlikely to overwhelm us at the back, I would have thought. So, you know, we'll see what happens, but you know, you have to face reality. We all do at certain points in our life, regardless of what you want to happen, what you think should happen. The facts staring you in the face mean that there's really, you know, only one plausible course of action. So, you know, we'll see what happens, but I really think we should be considering changing tactics. I don't think we're going to get the players we need before this tie, not even an emergency.
Well, the discussion itself, Patrick, you know, changing formation or being concerned at going through in this Champions League game, all come back to one thing, and it's recruitment. Because we lose Tierney, we lose Taylor and replace him with Tierney. Okay, that's great. That's an upgrade. Absolutely, I would agree with that. But we lose Kyogo in January and he's not replaced. We lose Kuhn at the end of the season. He's not replaced. And Jota's injured. So you're looking at 4 first-team starters gone, 1 in. So you're 3 guys down. And it's as simple as that, Patrick. I mean, we're talking about changing formation. Because, you know, sometimes it gets a bit stagnant playing the same formation constantly. But the way John's talking there, and I agree with him, you're changing formation to get the 11 best players on the park rather than, you know, shoehorning players into a formation who may not be doing as well as some of the guys who aren't starting the game. So it does come back to recruitment, unfortunately. And there's the recruitment gong There's the klaxon. It's gone off. We're going to have to talk about it. Not expecting much to happen this week. And by Brendan Rodgers' press conferences, neither is he. He doesn't seem that confident either. Do you think a big part of this goes back to the point John made? And it's about people are hedging their bets. Agents and players are waiting to see what happens next week and the week after.
I think that's got to be it. Yeah. Whether it's, they want to be Champions League players or they like Champions League money as their wages and we're not willing to go to that level yet. Whichever one it is, and maybe a mixture of both. I think it's got to be the only reasonable explanation. The idea that the club are holding out on paying big fees because we've only got 70 million in the bank and we want to get to 100 million before we buy players. I think that's definitely unreasonable in anyone's eyes. So you've got to imagine whether it's an agent or the player himself is telling Celtic that I'm just not willing to commit at this moment, which again there's very little we can do about, which is disappointing. But I still find it pretty incredible. If that is true, are we really going to sign a top quality front three in the space of 5 days? I mean, that's a hell of an ask. Because that is essentially what we need. I thought when Jota got injured, we won the league that day, didn't we? It was late April. The way to go was Alex Valley. It was not himself, but a 6-month loan to fill a number. I mean, Brendan said it a few weeks ago. It's arithmetic. It's a simple matter of arithmetic. You need to get someone in there. Jota was, is it 6 or 9 months? So that's possibly January we've got without him. So I thought a 6-month loan signing would have been the way to go, and you could make the argument: is there any point without an option to buy? But we've done the same with Simpson Pusey. We've got him in. There's no option to buy. What's the long-term strategy there? In terms of the other two, it's 12 months ago we had hundreds of wingers, and very few of them were any good. Now we've got next to no wingers. And we're relying on James Forrest and Maeda, who, in my opinion, is out of position. I think he's a striker the way he's been playing. Either that, or he's got some sort of attitude issue, or he's got something in his personal life right now. And then up front we've technically got 4 strikers. I think Osmond was playing a B team game the other day.
Yeah, last night.
Kenny contract extension. I think he's okay for a young player. If he was playing the same way at Ross County, would we really be signing him, is my question. And then either, God knows what's happened there. Just not in the game at all. Terrible first touch. I can't remember if it was Chris or John, one of you said that we're relying on the midfield and the defence to score our goals. I mean, all 3 goals that we've scored in the league this season have been from midfield or defence. It is a worrying sign. So we've got a lot of strikers, and yet we still need another one, because I know Yamada got on the pitch, but he never got on the pitch against St Mirren. Inamura as well, played a decent couple of games at pre-season, and look at what happens in both games. Tierney comes off, Trusty comes on, and Scales is moved to left back. I mean, what are we doing there? Is there some injury concern that we don't know about? It's happened sort of 10 days ago, because either Rodgers is refusing to play him and putting a good few people out of position to do so, or there's some fitness of injury concern that we've not heard about. So, I mean, it is a worry. I can't even remember what question you asked me there. Are we waiting on signings because they want us to be a Champions League club? I'd like to think that's the solution. If we get Balik Shiwan, I think he's a right winger. I think I'm right in saying so. With Forrest and Yang, that maybe solves that problem. Unless Yamada is the next Kyogo and also fits into Brendan's system. Unless that happens, I think we probably need to sign a striker as well. And I'd like to see a lone player come in short term, because running with one left winger, I know you'd have a few numbers, to sort of swash about with and swap wings, switch the wingers. I'd like to see us get a lone player in, and I'm surprised we didn't do that straight away, especially when we knew that Kuhn was going. So the idea that we've got 3 top quality forward players lined up, I think is fantasy. But if they do, then fair enough, and I'm looking forward to them signing 3 players in 5 days.
Yeah,
I would have said that. Sorry, Paul John. I was just going to say, Patrick, as you said that, when I was really looking forward to Yamada coming on, or Shin, as we were supposed to be calling him, I think. I was really looking forward to him coming on. Wanted to see what he could do. But then the ball barely went anywhere near him, and he had very, very limited opportunity, which made me think, are we being harsh on Ida? You know, is there just like a lack of cutting edge there, and maybe we're blaming the forward players when they're not entirely to blame. So because when he came on, he didn't, you know, nothing changed really. I mean, he barely touched the ball, and he did okay a couple of times and not so good the other couple of times. So it was sort of bang average debut. It didn't impact the game at all, but neither did Ida. So, you know, is it just because we're really, as a team, we're not playing that well? We're playing far too slowly. Build-up's too slow. It's not incisive enough. There's not enough runs being made. There's not enough space. There's not enough creativity. You know, it could be any one of those things. But you know, when another player comes on and also barely gets to touch the ball, you do start to think maybe it's not entirely their fault.
Well, you know this, John, I was watching that pretty closely because I thought he got a lot of plaudits after the game, Yamada. I don't know if it's just because people don't want to go in studs up because it's his first appearance. But I agree with you. I think the first two involvements in the game were poor and he failed to hold the ball up. But after that, he did a wee bit better and then obviously he got his chance. But I go back to the point, and we made it after the game, Chris, you and I, in relation to Ida and the fact that McGregor was trying to get him very specifically to drop deep. And it would basically lead me to believe that what Brendan Rodgers wants from his striker is to drop deep when we're looking for that point of attack. So it's come from one of the centre-halves to Callum McGregor. He wants the striker to drop deep, not necessarily to get the ball, but to draw the men out, and then you've got the space at the back. And then you've got to get back in between the sticks. Yeah. So Johnny Kenny does that very, very well, but he's not the finisher that we need. He doesn't have the quality when it comes to the finish. We've seen quite a lot of the times, Chris, him doing that, getting on the end of the move and failing to score. Adam Ida's not getting on the end of the move, which is the issue that he's got, right? And I don't know if that's a fitness issue or if it's just not his style or if he's not 100% in on it, because McGregor was giving him a rollicking at the weekend. Yamada, it remains to be seen if he's the guy. Kyogo could do it. Could do it. You know, he could drop deep, you know, be part of the move and then get on the end of it. Ida's not getting on the end of them. Kenny doesn't seem to have the quality to put it in the net. Yamada, who knows? Will he play on Friday? That's another discussion point. Let us know in the comment section. Lots of comments coming through. 1,600 strong and alive. The Pork Chop Express comes in. He's even got a wee pig there on his name. Wouldn't be surprised if we struggled over there and possibly at home. They're not great, but our forward line is worrying at the minute. Absolutely is. And it doesn't look as though we're going to have the players in before those two games. The Underwater Cabbage Salesman, honestly, the names get better. For everyone, the board the board have done to make Celtic a sustainable and profitable club. They have never put in place a scouting and recruitment system that allows the club to be proactive and proficient. John, you were talking earlier about the fact that, you know, Tisdale is Rodgers' man. He went on a scouting mission himself to watch one of the Swedish players. We felt it was the centre half, maybe it wasn't. So that's great to hear that you know, it's fluid at that side. But the minute it gets to the non-football department, it seems to break down. Jungle Lion, remember Mr. Steen told Jinky, do the business in the first leg and we won't need you for the second leg. Who was that against? Red Star Belgrade. Should do the same for the spine of the team. Win 6-0, bingo. I'll tell you, it's not a bad shout. It's not a bad shout when you're going over there, Jungle, and you've got Ibrox coming in the weekend following that as well. Now, in relation to something you mentioned earlier on, Osman did indeed start for the B team last night. They were playing Clyde. They won 3-1, and he scored. He scored the opening goal for Celtic. So he's gone from Premier League 2 to the Lowland League, which is the 5th tier, playing university teams and labourers and stuff like that, part-time footballers. So in terms of him and his development, if he's a development player, that's no development. That's the first point I would make. That's a step back from the level of football he was playing before. So perhaps they're thinking about a loan move. But when I seen last night, I thought, right, so he's not in the first team plans. So perhaps he'll be moved out on loan. If he's not, though, and I'll come to you first on this, Chris. We were talking just the other week there about a young guy, 17-year-old, who played with Portobello called Philip Skorb. Sure. He's been representing the Polish international team right up to, I'm going to say 19s, maybe 20s actually. He's really ahead of his time physically. When you look at him, he's a specimen. And obviously Celtic beat a lot of clubs to his signature a few years ago, Rangers being one of the clubs. Michael Beale actually spoke about him as a replacement, believe it or not, for Morelos. Yeah, he said that in the press. Anyway, he's at Celtic, Philip Scorb. He's scoring for the B team, and he's dropping to the bench. So I look at his development, and I think, right, so Osman's going to fail to develop going from Premier League 2 to fifth-tier Scottish football, and Philip Scorb, who seems to be progressing well, ends up on the bench. I don't see the logic in that, Chris.
It's not development, it's stagnation. I'm sorry, but the B team is not a developmental league. It just isn't. It's the level of quality that the guys are facing down there is in no way, shape or form appropriate for them to develop into contenders for first team football. We need to start leveraging the loan market as much as possible and get these young guys out playing competitive football in amongst the level of players that are similar to what they'll not only face but who they'll end up playing alongside. When we saw the pre-season games, and me and you covered a few of them this season, and again, I know the context, it's pre-season, but I was alarmed at some of the timid play that came from some of our young players. They looked incapable of showing any level of innovation or taking the initiative or taking a bit of ownership. At times it was play the safe pass, and it was again similar complaints to what we have with the first team. It's horseshoe. It was round to the side, back, playing towards your line of sight, not nobody picking up the ball and deciding to take a chance. This is your opportunity. You're playing in front of you. You're on television. You've got an opportunity to play in front of the manager. Go and showcase your skills. Show what you can do. But it looks to me like it's that they're bereft of confidence and they don't look ready to make the step up to the first team. I know we had a couple of success stories and glimpses last season with young Ricardo, for example. There's a few players who look, relatively decent. Ewer, who's gone out to, I think he's going out to play with Scott Brown, hasn't he? So I just think we're sending these guys to football limbo down there. There's no the gap between that level and the level we're expecting these guys to develop into is far, far too wide. And I just don't think we can bridge the gap with the current B team setup. So the loan market is where we need to leverage in order to give these guys the right level of development. And that's a sad endorsement of the state of Scottish football, right?
Yeah, there's a few things with the B team. We've obviously bought into it, John. There's other teams who are involved who have pulled their teams out of that league. And I just think that unless there's a few changes, it's not going to work. It's going to remain, as Chris says, as a stagnation kind of area for players that don't want to play there. Daniel Cummings, do you want to play in 50 Scottish football, or you want to come and play in Premier League 2? Well, you know what? There's absolutely no doubt that any aspiring footballer would take the latter as the option, right? But there's a couple of things that can happen. The first thing is open up the pyramid to the B team. So if you win the league, or if you come second, you're in the playoffs, you can get promoted up to the second tier. The way that they do it in Belgium and the way that they do it all over the world, Spain and the Netherlands, etc. So there's all these teams that do that. There's all these leagues that do that. And I think we need to do that for it to work properly. I also think it needs to be more of a hybrid in terms of, right, you're developing young guys there, but they will also develop, John, if you've got an old head coming back. I mean, I'm thinking back even to your old fella's time, and you had guys like Neely Mockin, for example. And Neely Mockin, if he wasn't playing for the first team, he would be playing in the reserves. You imagine Neely Mockin playing in front of you, a guy who had played in the World Cup finals for Scotland, a guy who had scored in the 7-1 game, and he's maybe 33, 34 and a wee bit older and a wee bit slower. But you'd learn everything from playing with guys like that, John. And I don't think that's changed much now when you look at it. We've got guys, we've mentioned a couple of them. Ian Moore, what's he doing week to week? We used to laugh about James McCarthy and Scott Bain. These guys aren't contributing at all to Celtic. And I just think, get them in there, put them into the kind of second string, but allow them to use their experience to bring these young guys on. I mean, Marco Tilio's on cold storage at the moment. Play him right wing. He's got a lot more of experience than the 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds in and around that team. I think that there needs to be a few tweaks, John, before that's going to work. But Scottish football being Scottish football, I doubt that it will happen.
Yeah, I would say that if you try to send a first-team player to play with the B team, you would have real problems with the management of that player. People used to not like going to the reserves. Can you imagine what it'd be like going to play with the kids? That'd be considered cruel and unusual punishment, I think. So
So that's where we're sending Yang. We're going to put Yang out there, Sorry, everybody in the Yang gang, before you pile on me here regarding my treatment of the man.
I mean, it's very obvious that if there's not going to be a reserve league, the clubs that should be able to progress their effective reserve teams up through the divisions. Because if you're not going to provide, if Scottish football won't provide a realistic pathway, which it doesn't, and it's not just the clubs can't magic a competition out of somewhere. Do you know what I mean? Just like Brendan can't magic the players, but there has to be an option for these people to improve, and there just isn't. We simply don't have one. So this new improved loan thing, you're sending them out on loan, but then they're in other clubs that might be beneficial for them. It might not be, because again, what level of club is going to want them? You know what I mean? And what level of club is going to play them? So are they going to benefit from those loans? And it would be much better, I think, more beneficial for us to be in control of that situation, to be in control of their development, to be in control of a pathway, and effectively have them progressing up through the divisions. I just, as you say, it's done in the majority of other leagues. I have no idea why we can't do that. Obviously, they'll say, likes of Celtic, Rangers would have clubs in the second division or first division, and basically then you would be depriving other teams of that. But again, those other teams would have the opportunity to send people out as well if they had It can't all be about that. We have to have some development of players, and including Scottish players, I might add, the Scottish FA. So to be playing in a big club and still be under control of that big club for your training, for your opportunities, for learning, as we say, and again, there's the very thing, we can drop people down. Can you drop the first team players down a division to play for a reserve side? Of course you can. Of course you can. That's acceptable. That's understandable. And that benefits, that player potentially for fitness and the young players for learning. But you can't drop them to the Highland League. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
The player that used to do that quite a bit, and he probably enjoyed it, was Marvin Compere. Used to go and play for the reserves when they played at Capello. Big Compere smile all the time on Celtic TV, strolling games, Patrick, as if he was Beckenbauer. So yeah, there's that element. It's like playing football with your bear in the back garden. You just think, I've still got it. I could have been a player. Talking of young talent coming through, Patrick, I'm jesting. Lennon Miller, obviously, he's on his way. He's gone. He's away to Italy. I think we called that a while back. We were looking at all the talented Scottish players who had ended up in Italy, and obviously it's even improved last season with McTominay. I mean, he's been nominated for the Ballon d'Or, hasn't he? So Lennon Miller's gone. Motherwell get a record fee. A lot of people writing it off, saying, he didn't want to stay in Scotland anyway. I was reading an interesting report this morning, though. Big shout out to Paddy Sinnott for bringing it to my attention. And it was quoting Mark Guidi, who said that Brendan Rodgers actually was desperate to sign Lennon Miller in January, and that the club missed the opportunity because they couldn't get it over the line. What do you make of that, Patrick? News to me.
Well, I'm a bit disappointed by that, because I think he's a great player, and I think I think he would have came in and played games. I mean, even if he needs to go back to Motherwell for, say, a 6-month loan, a 12-month loan, whatever it is, I think he could have came in and played. I think I'm sure we played Motherwell at some point last season. They hit the post twice or something.
Yeah.
One of them from range, one from a free kick or something. And I was just going on the assumption that we didn't want him, and that's the only reason we didn't sign him. So to hear that, I don't know if Mark Guidi's making stuff up or whether he actually knows that to be true, but if Brendan really did want him and we couldn't get him over the line for 4 or 5 million, I think that's extremely disappointing. We signed a young Scott Brown for 4.5 million almost 20 years ago, so I don't think it's too much of an ask to be signing Lennon Miller even for 4.5 million 18 years later, or whatever it is. I'm going to amalgamate 2 of the points that you've just made. I'm going to suggest, instead of the Celtic B team, we should be loaning these players out. And the way Tony Bloom's talking, I think Hearts would sort of laugh in our face if we tried to loan them some youth players. But a team like Aberdeen, a team like Hibs, even a team lower down the league who want to play football the right way, keep it on the deck so that they'd be used to playing in a system similar to ours, if not exactly like ours. And if it doesn't work in Scotland, if we don't want to send them to Ross County or Livingston, why don't we find a CVB club to partner with instead of the Championship or a Premiership club? I mean, there's so many players over in Italy now, Scottish players or players who have played in Scotland. I mean, is this something the club have even explored? I know Chelsea, I think they had a deal with AZ Alkmaar. I want to say it's AZ Alkmaar. The AZ Alkmaar team was full of Chelsea loan players. It was ridiculous, I think. No, I think it was another team. Anyway, FC20 or something. I can't quite remember the team. Someone will pick it up, I'm sure. But I don't know why we don't maybe partner with a foreign club. I mean, Italian teams, I know it's a bit stop-start. The football's a bit slow. There's a lot of diving and the referee likes to stop the game, but it's on the deck. It's nice football. It's it'd be similar to the way that we want to play. So I don't know if there's maybe a route there. Maybe not Serie A, maybe CVB. But I think that's a pathway, and I'm sure if Sean Maloney is pathways manager, I'm sure he's looking at every option. Because should we really be signing guys from Fulham, promising them the world, and then starting them against Stirling University and whatever it is, Albion Locomotive or whatever team is in that league.
Civil Service
or
Strollers, don't forget that.
Could they go into the Championship? But then you look at teams who are at the bottom end of the Championship, and again, it's part time, and it's a much more physical league. So I mean, they'd probably sort of bulk up and be battle hardened after coming back from that. But are they really developing any more than what they were at the Premier League B level at Fulham? I mean, fair enough, he can't get into the Fulham team, so he's maybe not at that level, but he's at a level where he should be playing for maybe some sort of Scottish club, and that's why I suggested CVB. I think that's something that we should maybe explore, maybe some foreign team at even the Spanish lower divisions. I think that's an option that we need to look at.
I like the Italian idea.
Sorry, because it was so funny to me. Udinese to tease the signing of Lennon Miller, just like our guys do. Sorry, they put up a picture of the Loch Ness Monster. It's just like, I mean, are you trying to tell me there's no globally recognisable image of Motherwell they could have used? The Loch Ness Monster. Oh my God!
Brilliant, fantastic, and it was a decent image as well, quite clear. I'm not sure when it was taken, but when you look at Lennon Miller and Serie B or Serie A, and a lot of the Scottish guys going over there and being a real success, Chris. Pitching young Scottish talent going over to an Italian team wouldn't be a hard sell at the moment, because they would be thinking, wait a minute, we're going to have first dibs on these guys if they do well.
It's the right time to strike, really, because the Scottish profile has never been higher. You've got Scott McTominay on the Ballon d'Or list, which is just incredible. So, and I believe the majority of young players or players who've maybe moved on out there are doing very, very well. So, yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. But there's actually a solution closer to home. As we were watching the Aberdeen game, and we had Glenn from the Aberdeen podcast on here last week prior to the game as well. And he spoke about the lack of firepower that Aberdeen have at the moment, and that was actually evident when we played them. Why are we not getting an Osmond or a Kenny out to Aberdeen and saying, mutually beneficial, doesn't play against us, plays against our rivals? I can't see a downside. I really can't.
Because Aberdeen don't want them either.
Well, there is that, but you can't, beggars can't be choosers, about the phrase. So, but I think, look, I think the point, though, whether it's Italy, whether it's in our domestic league, whether it's down south, we just have to get these guys into an environment where they're playing competitive football at a level that allows them to up their development. Because at the moment they seem very one pace, it's very one note. As the guys have said, you're not going to develop playing against. I don't know, the prison release team or whatever the hell they're playing this week. It's just you've got to play as close to or as representative as a level as you want these guys to get to, and you want to replicate that system that you spoke about, Paul John, where you have one or two senior pros and amongst them that they can actually take that learning from. They can learn the not just the skills on the park, but the attitude, the way they approach training, the way they approach games, build up the mentality, etc. And I just think the B team doesn't offer any of that at the moment. And that's not a criticism directed at Celtic. Celtic are having to make use of the system because it's there. But I just think we have to now look at how do we get the best out of these young guys and give them that platform to make the grade. Because as we keep talking about, you've got James Forrest, you've got Callum McGregor, you've got Kieran Tierney. Who's next in the chain? There's no obvious candidate. Who's next to come up and take on that kind of profile at our club? And I looked at the B team and I struggled to pick anyone out.
Well, we've not had a goal scoring striker coming through the ranks for a long, long time. I've mentioned Charlie Nicholas and then Jerry Craney and then ... People say Mark Burchell, Sean Maloney wasn't really a centre forward though, was he? And a few guys have come in and scored a few goals, but we've not had that stapled on goal scorer. We've got a guy sitting on the bench now because Osman's coming from Fulham. That does not make sense to me. You're talking about the prison release team. I remember when we played a Scottish Cup game at underaged football, you could draw Glenacle Prison. I'm talking like under 14s. I'm not joking. Under 15s, under 16s, right? And we drew Glenacle, and obviously for obvious reasons, all their games were at home, and you had to actually go in and play them. Seriously, it was the scariest environment I have ever played football in. There was wardens on each side of the park. I think one of them was running the line. Honestly, right? And you were going in for big ferocious tackles and kind of like just drawn out when you saw the big Mars bars on their faces and everything. It was interesting. We did beat them 3-1 and got out of dodge. But you were talking about Ballon d'Or. 1983, Gordon Strachan came fourth in the Ballon d'Or. And I remember we had him up at Barazat and last year. And I just discovered this fact that Gordon Strachan came fourth in the Ballon d'Or. And his response to that was, did I? Didn't even know. It's just typical Gordon Strachan patter. Brendan McCarthy, hail boys. Kairat will be a tough tie, but we should win. And then the fun begins. Well, I'll tell you what, the mood will be vastly different if we do get through. And then you get the big draw and everybody's buzzing. You get the fixtures and you've got the big glamour ties. Absolutely. A lot of this can change on the flip of that. But unfortunately for me, Patrick, I think the club are just hoping for that, and they hope that all their sins will be washed away with Champions League qualification. And they can't be. They just can't be, because the deficiencies still exist, don't they? When we talk about recruitment, academy, stadium, fan engagement, the media platforms, all these things are still inept. All these things still need a lot of attention and investment, don't they?
Absolutely. And it's, on one hand, it's the sort of, the way that everyone's looking at it now, it's the key that unlocks the door, because we're just assuming that either the club are waiting or the players are waiting for us to be a Champions League club and then spend the big money on the forward players that we need. On the other hand, in my opinion, it's one of the two bare minimums that the club should be hitting every year, which is qualify for the Champions League and win the SPFL. I think any year we fail to do that is now unacceptable with the position that we're in. Fair enough, 10 years ago we maybe didn't have the same money that we have now, but we've got, a ridiculous amount of money in the bank. We've got a Premier League manager. Hundreds of money, that's it. It will soon be hundreds of millions after this if we qualify for the Champions League this year, which is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, it's on one hand it's the key that unlocks the door. On the other hand, for me, it's a bare minimum. You've heard either directors or shareholders or guys heavily involved with Celtic who have a substantial net worth say that it's an achievement in itself just to be in the Champions League. I don't accept that. Fair enough if you get 3-4 qualifiers. It's a hell of an ask early on in the season. Physically for the players it's an achievement, but for the club as a whole it's not an achievement for the position that we're in right now at this moment. And we should cede to I don't think we should sink from this position. Essentially, I think it should be an absolute priority and a bare minimum, in my opinion. I think there's going to be a lot of upset the next time that we don't qualify for the Champions League, because they can talk about rainy day funds all they like. A refusal to spend money, in case we don't make it, and then we don't make it because we didn't spend any money. I mean, it's a doom loop. I think John called it 2 weeks ago. It's an absolute doom loop. So bare minimum for me, and I think that the real achievement is what happened last season, where we're able to compete were able to give a good showing home and away, which I think we did do, and then getting into that COP24 spot. Fair enough, we might have a more difficult draw. It might not be possible. I think we're all quite realistic when it comes to the Champions League draw. But we gave Bayern Munich a game, and that's all we can really ask for. I don't think anyone was expecting us to, put Bayern Munich to the sword, but we ended up giving them a game, and I think we're all very proud of the team and the club for our European campaign last year. So I think that's all we're asking for. I think it is now bare minimum. So I think there will be a more positive outlook, but in terms of the key unlocking the door, we need to sign players or else we're going to get absolutely humped. Essentially, we're going to get a doing by quite a few teams, I imagine, if we don't sign some forward players, because we get a doing off of Dortmund. I think if we push the boat out a wee bit more, we could have beat Club Brugge, we could have beat Dinamo Zagreb. So I think we're going to get a tougher draw, and we need players in order to compete again. And you can never tell what the draw is going to be like. I think the draw is actually the day after the second leg, I think I'm right in saying. But we need those players in, and there's no excuses. In fact, I'd be really, really interested in 4 or 5 weeks' time. I know the sort of annual accounts come out sort of mid-September, and that's as of June 30th, I believe. It'd be really interesting to see just how much cash we had in the bank as of June 30th, because we've not signed that many players. We've not spent a lot of money. I know wages come out of that pile, but we've not spent a hell of a lot, so we've probably get most of that left. So 3-4 weeks' time will be a really interesting story, I think.
The big thing about the doom loop that you've quoted there, when I think about John, the ambition of the Celtic board and the stagnation of the fact that it's kind of old board style that you would have two guys on there that have got a combined service of 44 years. Unless they're bringing something really special to the table, they shouldn't be there. That needs to be livened up. You need a wee bit more entrepreneurial flair. You need diversity in that boardroom. You need people to be bringing ideas to the table, but you need vision and you need ambition at Celtic. And the big thing for me is, and I mentioned this the other day, John, Nicholas Kuhn doesn't have that Champions League campaign. He doesn't sell for £17 million. The buzz around Celtic, a massive part of it last season was the Champions League endeavours, the big nights at Celtic Park, extra nights, not just participating, as Patrick says, some of the board are happy just to participate and get a few jollies every year, but to actually compete. And then your merchandise goes up and the season ticket sales are getting sold out quicker. Everything, there's a knock-on effect of everything from player value, John, to fan spend. Why don't the board see that? Because all they're interested in is money in the balance sheet. So surely they can see how doing well at the top table of European football benefits all their own lucrative ambitions.
Well, right now it could just be about one man's absolute determination to prove how good he is at negotiating and getting value. It could just be that simple. Basically, the board are all just nodding dogs for Dermot Desmond. So, what do they offer? And again, you would ask, does it matter if we get a new puppet in? There's a reason why they're still there. And that's because they all will just do what Dermot Desmond says. That's why they're still there. If they were creating a problem, they probably wouldn't be ultimately. So if someone else is going to come in, something fundamental has to change in the attitude to how that board works, because it is not functioning really as anything else except, a committee to approve Dermot Desmond's decisions that he's already taken. It's not. I doubt very much there's any discussion that goes into it, and the fact that he still seems to be so heavily involved in these sort of negotiations is deeply inappropriate and deeply worrying. That's not supposed to be happening, and you struggle to find another business where that happens. Actually, I think it's pretty uncommon with a PLC. More so, pretty common with limited companies and stuff, but a PLC, very unusual for someone to hold that much sway. That board has been built to do exactly what it's doing, which is nothing. That's what it's there for. It's there to do nothing and just stamp approval of Dermot's signing of Dermot's decisions. So, we have. I know you were having discussions about boycotts and all that, and whether they use them, and people saying that we said just buy all the merch and all this sort of stuff, just a load of nonsense. Sure, I ran a poll on it myself just a couple of weeks ago to see what traction it would have. But as you pointed out the other day, the position is far more fundamentally serious than that. A boycott will achieve nothing. What are you going to do? There's tens of thousands on the waiting list, and they've got hundreds of millions in the bank, or 150 million, say, in the bank. And what are you going to do? Boycott the merch? The merch that sells all over America and all around sells just as much to non-Celtic fans as it does probably to Celtic fans. So, we to say, people saying, stop complaining about the board, take some action. What action? Let's just be serious about this. If Dermot Desmond decides we're going to sign players, we're going to sign players. If he decides we're not, we're not. And it doesn't matter what we think, because he doesn't care what we think. And I don't know a way to change that. I don't know a way to, what was it we got Brendan the first time? Because the Rangers board of directors wound them up by celebrating a win, wasn't it? So,
John, I can see that you're thinking, how can we wind them up? How can we wind them up?
But the thing about it is, and this is what happened during the COVID season, if we attack Dermot Desmond, he doubles down.
Yeah.
He will not listen. He's not just going to suddenly go, well, I need to listen to the fans. He's going to go, how dare these people who don't know anything what they're talking about be attacking me when I have achieved all this success. So in his mind, he doesn't need to be listening to us. But, I don't know how to solve it. And at times like this, I don't have any suggestions for how you change it, because at times like this, it's incredibly frustrating. We should be looking forward to a really strong showing in Europe this year. There should be no question about being worried about a qualifier. We should be battering into this qualifier and then doing well in the group stages. It shouldn't be a question. And as I said before, the issue that we have is we're not going to be in the Champions League for the next few years, because if we're taking this stand now with one qualifier against supposedly easy opposition, we're going to have 3 qualifiers against properly good opposition in the coming years. And so we're not going to see the Champions League if this is the approach we're taking. And I don't know how to fix it. I wish I did. But right now, it seems insane that we haven't signed people. There's so much money on the line. And you would have thought that would be the thing, and not value, because if you're obsessed with value, surely you have to factor in the fact that there is, whether we get value for them or not, they'll pay for themselves 4 or 5 times over, right? Because we've already made the money on player sales, and we're potentially making, another 35, 40 million in the Champions League if we have a decent showing. What is value in that? In the light of that, in that context of that, surely we have to have better players. This shouldn't be a discussion. It shouldn't be a topic at all. And it's maddening that it is.
No, you're right. We get one injury to Kieran Tierney, and potentially we'll be bringing Inamura, an untested 250 grand signing for Japan, to play left back. These things shouldn't be happening. We're not just using it as a greeting meeting, ladies and gents. I know that if this is not the type of discussion you wanted to hear, not as many of you would be listening in, but almost 1,700 on a live stream on a Wednesday would suggest, and all the comments that we get after the live would suggest that these are the topics you want to discuss. If there's anything else you want to discuss, throw it in the comments section. If you want to win this jersey that's sitting behind me, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me which player do you think of when you see the original. There's the original there. What's the first player? Who is the first player that you think of when you see that original jersey? A lot of people saying Jackie McNamara. Thanks, a lot of people. Thanks, everyone, for getting involved, Patrick. That was before your time. It's always an absolute pleasure to be joined by this squad. Please join us again tomorrow at 12:30 on A Celtic State of Mind.